So welcome, good. Welcome to the Unitarian Church of Baton Rouge. My name is Nathan. I'm one of your ministers. I am pleased to welcome you tonight. I have a few announcements. Well, actually, let's go ahead and get started the way we do visitors. The way that we start a service here, well, this isn't a service. Well, it is a service. It's a service of kind, is we have a chalice lighting that we do. And we usually say, with hope to make this a better, you're welcome to join if you know it. With hope to make this a better world, we light this flame. Its light is a symbol of the power of love. So here are the things you need to know. My name is Nathan. I'm the senior minister. Reverend Chris Long is the minister of congregational life. Kathy was sitting here. I was going to introduce. Online people, I'm sorry. Over there is now Kathy Smith, our director of family ministry. I think we've staffed out everyone. We are glad that you were with us. The few things for you to know is that tomorrow the session will go from 10 to 3. We are not providing lunch. This is not this is like ungood Louisiana hospitality. But for reasons we'll explain later, we needed to sort of cut some financial corners, and so we're asking you to bring your own lunch. Or bring some pizzas, and then you can give it to people who didn't bring their lunch. But we are glad that you were with us. After this, there will be a reception. So we are also, for you to know, we are streaming this service, so it is online and available. So let me let you know a little of what is happening today. I have been a Unitarian Universalist all my life. When I was about 22, I don't know if you knew this, I was at the Unitarian Church of Austin, and Michael Dowd and Connie Barlow, his wife, were speaking there, and I heard you speak way back then. And I'd kind of been following quite a bit. Often you two come together, but Connie is prioritizing her grandkids right now for the weekend, right?
Not exactly, but I'll explain.
All right. So that's your story, so I'll let you tell it. They've been doing this work for decades. Right, and 6 Nobel scientists they've endorsed, that's Thank God for Evolution. Yep.
Praise Darwin.
Praise Darwin, everybody. They've done this more than 3,000 times. They've been to half of all of the UU churches in the country, along with actually you probably, other than maybe a UUA president, have been in more sanctuaries than almost any. So I heard you again in 2019 at a minister's retreat, and I'm going to let you talk the theology, but it was very important for me that you as a congregation and also the people of Baton Rouge were able to be exposed to this theology for the second time because you came in like 2006, and also especially because over the years your theology has also started to really encompass a lot of what is happening with the climate. And because down here is where a lot of that happens, we thought it was important for you to come down. So the way it's going to work is you're going to talk for like an hour or so. We will stop. Before we ask questions, we'll ask people to give an offering just to help defray some of the costs. And then we'll have 20, 30 minutes for Q&A or longer, and then we'll have a reception. Visitors, stick with us for a second. We have a new floor in there, and a bunch of people are probably going to be excited, so go enjoy the floor. And then tomorrow, and then you're preaching Sunday, 9 o'clock, 11:30. Online people, we're going to try and grab your questions from the chat, and if you're watching live, of course. And other than that, Reverend Michael Dowd.
Well, I first want to thank Maida for really making this happen, and I am just so grateful. And has given me a Southern Louisiana experience, cultural experience, both last night and today, that's just priceless, so thank you. The word theology and theologian and, theological is kind of an odd one in Unitarian Universalist circles, at least among some. I call myself a compost theologian. I used to call myself an eco-theologian. but I like compost theology because, well, let me give you just my creed in a nutshell. This is my worldview in a nutshell. Reality is my God. Evidence is my scripture. The epic of evolution is my creation story. Ecology is my theology. Integrity is my spiritual path. And promoting right relationship to reality is my mission. And so that core is what my wife and I have been devoted to now for 22 years. Ever since we got married 22 years ago, we've been basically evangelizing science. My favorite compliment, an evangelical minister said, Dowd is like a cross between a Pentecostal and Carl Sagan. I'm like, okay, was that a criticism? You know? So what I'd like to do before I get into content tonight, because there's a lot of my stuff that's available online. Connie and I have traveled North America for 19 years. We've spoken, as Nathan mentioned, in about half the Unitarian Universalist Association, about 500 churches. We've actually spoken to about 3,000 groups. And we always speak about where science, inspiration, and sustainability intersect. So I focus on what I call the sacred side of science. That is the meaningful, inspiring side of what global collective intelligence, which is what science is about, has helped us understand about the nature of reality. And how to live in right relationship to reality, and what are the things that get in the way of living in right relationship to reality. And so we've done this now for 19 years. Then for the last 2.5 years, or 2 years, we've been living in Ypsilanti, Michigan because COVID happened and I can do everything via Zoom. So I've been doing Zoom sermons and homilies and what have you and programs for secular and religious groups because I speak as often in non-religious settings as religious settings. Because, again, it's the inspiring side of an evolutionary ecological worldview. And that's really the two sciences that I focus most on is evolution and ecology. And then especially now, climate and the breakdown of industrial civilization, the contracting phase of industrial civilization. And so there's lots of my stuff online. Over the course of the last 20 years, we've created videos, stuff's on YouTube. There's tons of my stuff. I've done 2 TED Talks, TEDx Talks in Grand Rapids. All this stuff's up there. But what I wanted to do here is not just do what I do there. So what I'd like to do is just give you just maybe another 5-10 minutes of just sort of a little nutshell of the essence of what I've been doing, especially the last 5 years, and then stop and invite you to tell me what questions do you come here with, or based on what I say in the first 10 or 15 minutes, what questions do you have that you'd love to hear addressed, you'd love me respond to tonight. And I'm not going to respond to each question. I'm just going to jot a few key words to remind myself of each one. And that'll give me a sense of how to tone or, what direction. Because trust me, having done, 20 years of programs on the whole range of ecological and evolutionary sciences and human nature and evolutionary brain science and stuff, I could go there. I've got 12 hours at least of stuff that I could do. But I don't want to share with you what I think you want to know or what I think you're interested in. I'd actually rather respond to what you're actually interested in and what you really genuinely care about. And where are your concerns or your fears or your, hopes or whatever. So let me just start by saying just some broad things about what we've been doing for 20 years, what shifted in December of 2012, because it was a totally life-changing shift. And then especially what I've been focusing on the last 5 years, which is why I think that I was invited to speak to you all here. And I need to say at the very start that the title that was given to tonight, Living Beyond Hope and Fear, Staying Calm in the Storm, I don't know squat about staying calm in the storm. Literally. You guys have experienced it. You all have experienced it literally. So I'm speaking more abstract about that. But what I do know a fair bit about is the way that nature, the universe, reality has created our brains and our emotions and how we typically deal with things. So here's what I The heart and soul of what I've been doing for 20 years, and much longer, but Connie and I are traveling, is the epic of evolution, the universe story. So when I say, let me just quick go through the sort of my creed. When I say reality is my God, what I mean is this. Your God is whatever you put your faith or trust in. If you put your faith or trust in the market, that's your God. If you put your faith and trust in technology, that's your God. If you put your faith or trust in human ingenuity, that's your God. It's whatever you put your faith, it's your ultimate concern or your ultimate commitment. And this isn't just Michael Dowd saying this. Arguably the most influential theologian of the second half of the 20th century, Paul Tillich, famously identified faith as your ultimate concern. And so, what is it that we put our ultimate concern or ultimate commitment to? What do we surrender to, if anything? And so, reality is my God. Reality is what I'm surrendered to. Reality is my commitment. One of the books that Connie and I have been evangelistic about is Richard Dawkins' book, The Magic of Reality. I wrote a book called Thank God for Evolution. Right? It was endorsed by 6 Nobel Prize-winning scientists, but Richard Dawkins wrote Appendix A. And my publisher thought, you're never going to get Dawkins to let you print a letter that he wrote to his 10-year-old daughter in a book with God in the title. Well, my wife has known him for years. And so he was like, sure, Michael, go for it, but don't ask me for a blurb. I said, fine. Right?
But now you say we shouldn't buy it.
Yeah, well, I don't say we shouldn't buy it. My book, Thank God for Evolution, 90% of it I fully agree with still. But the 10% I don't agree with, I really don't. And so in the course of tonight, I can get into what those specific things are. But so reality is my God. That is, reality is my ultimate commitment. And what I mean by reality is what is evidentially known to be true based on global collective intelligence. I love Philip K. Dick's definition of reality. Because when I speak in philosophy departments, I can usually count on some young philosophy major trying to trip me up and say, well, what do you mean by reality? And Philip K. Dick said, reality is that which when you stop believing in it, doesn't go away. So that's my ultimate commitment. Reality is my ultimate concern, my ultimate commitment. Evidence is my scripture. That is, evidence is the main way reality reveals itself to us. The evidence of global collective intelligence, the evidence of our own experience, but again, that can be delusional if it's not in some way validated by other people's subjective experience. So reality is my God, evidence is my scripture. The epic of evolution is my creation story. The universe story, the 13.8 to be exact, billion-year history of everyone and everything, physical evolution, biological evolution, cultural evolution, as our first and only globally produced evidence-based creation story. It can have mythic components. In fact, Ed Wilson, famously said that the epic of evolution is the best myth that we'll ever have. And what he was meaning by myth was not an untrue story. He means it the way Joseph Campbell did, a narrative that puts us in accord with the nature of reality. So reality is my God, evidence is my scripture. The epic of evolution is my creation story. And specifically, and this is what shifted for me in 2012, the epic of evolution not told in a human-centered way, but in a life-centered way. The epic of evolution told in a human-centered way is delusional. And we can say a lot more about that as we go on. So, reality is my God, evidence is my scripture. The epic of evolution is my creation story. Ecology is my theology. That's a huge one. In fact, I've now, for any of you that have seen some of my stuff in recent years, know that I now spell the word God, G, earth emoji, D. And I do that for one simple reason, which is any notion of the divine that doesn't include our biophysical creator, sustainer, and end is an ecocidal notion of the divine. And the problem is, in human-centered cultures, human-centered civilizations, most of the time, their images or understandings of the divine, and in fact everything, politics, economics, everything in the society, is human-centered. So we've had human-centered understandings of God, which are totally ecocidal. There's not a human civilization in human history. We know of over 80 examples of a human-centered understanding of the divine that didn't commit ecocide. So one of the things I'll talk about tonight, and tomorrow as well, is the fundamental differences between truly sustainable, not like greenwashed faux sustainability, but genuinely sustainable and unsustainable or ecocidal. That is, cultures that predictably go through the boom and bust, progress, regress, rise and fall, overshoot and collapse. Over 80 examples of that. Truly sustainable is all about not changing anything. It's about preserving the living biosphere as a greater thou, not a lesser it. Once cultures start treating the living world as merely a larder and a toilet, a set of resources and a place for our waste, that society is destined to collapse. It's already begun collapsing in that process. Truly sustainable is very simple. It's honoring the living systems that make everything that your culture, your tribe, your society, making everything possible, honoring those systems, the air, the water, the soil, the forest, the life that makes your life possible, with religious devotion, upon pain of death or ostracizing. That's truly sustainable, which is taking the wisdom of how to live. It's called The Way. In fact, one of the most important books of the 20th century was called The Way, An Ecological Worldview, by Edward Goldsmith. And he talks about that truly traditional cultures, truly sustainable cultures, honored the way of life, the way of nature, and honored and learned how to live in right relationship to that, because that's the only thing that natural selection would select for over time. Cultures that lived in right relationship to the air, water, soil, and life upon which they depend. Cultures that were able to live in place without destroying the place. That's truly sustainable. Unsustainable is when we take the living world and make stuff out of it, sell it, in our kind of society, it goes to the waste heap, and the faster that happens, we call that progress. It's insane. It's ultimately crazy. That's why boom and bust cultures always go through progress, regress. And the progress isn't for everybody. It's not for the slaves. It's not for many people. But it's for the elites and the ruling class. And that process goes on. So again, reality is my God. Evidence is my scripture. The epic of evolution is my creation story. Ecology is my theology. That's why I call myself a compost theologian, right? It's the earth. It's the soil. When I speak to Christian audiences, I say, if where you find Christ isn't in the soil, every other place you look is a delusion. And what I mean by Christ isn't some woo-woo being. What I'm meaning is the essence of nature, the essence of reality that is all about taking what dies, taking what's broken, taking what's decaying, and making something out of that, new life coming out of that. That process isn't merely about one God-man 2,000 years ago. It's about the nature of nature at all scales of reality. Integrity is my spirituality. What I mean by that is integrity are simply the practices and exercises that help me live in right relationship with reality. Reality is my God, right? So, and again, spelled G, or every time I use the word God, please never think about something supernatural, otherworldly. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about reality with a personality, not a person outside reality. I'm talking about life personified, circumstances personified, the universe personified. That's our biophysical creator, sustainer, and end. And I'm not going to dwell on that. I'm not going to use that language a lot because it doesn't work for some Unitarians, which is fine. Just let's use the word life. We need to live in right relationship to life or we will perish. And it doesn't matter whether you believe in life or not. It's not about beliefs. Once religions become belief-bound, where you think that, believing in a supernatural being, God is a sort of a supernatural creator that lives off the planet and outside the universe. And if you believe in that being, you're a theist. And if you disbelieve in that being, you're an atheist. I sometimes think of theism and atheism as in a neck-and-neck race to see which one can cheerlead ecocide more effectively. Because they both treat our biophysical creator, sustainer, and end, the biosphere, the earth, life, as an it to be exploited, not a thou to be honored and respected. So reality is my God, evidence is my scripture, the epic of evolution is my creation story, ecology is my theology. Integrity is my spirituality, and again, by integrity, the practices, the exercises, the mindset, the skills. I'll be offering, for those that are interested, a 5-part series beginning not this Tuesday, but the following Tuesday, called Skills for Post-Doom, No Gloom Living. I'll say a lot more about post-doom, no gloom, but basically it's all about skill development. Because there are skills that allow us to live in a positive place, in a heartful place, in a generous place, being mesmerized by life, even in a collapsing society. And that's really what my work has in recent years been focused on. So, reality is my God, evidence is my scripture, the epic of evolution is my creation story, ecology is my theology, integrity is my spiritual path, and promoting or evangelizing right relationship to reality is my mission. And what I mean by that is when we come into right relationship to what's fundamentally, undeniably, and inescapably real, including the things that we do not like, the stuff we hate, when we can accept what's real, be with it, and then basically come from the place of, okay, here's what's real, now what's possible? What's possible accepting what's real? It's that old, the old serenity. Some of you I know have watched the video that made suggested called the New Serenity Prayer. Emotional support for climate anxiety and environmental dread, I think is what I called it. And the Serenity Prayer, it was penned by actually somebody who was a religious naturalist, Reinhold Niebuhr, in the 1960s. God, life, reality. Help me accept, or allow me to accept the things that I cannot change, the serenity to accept the things I can't change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Any of you that are in 12-step know that that's center to that program, those sets of programs also. But many people don't know the next lines, 2 lines. Living one day at a time, accepting one moment at a time, honoring hardship as the pathway to peace. Honoring hardship as the pathway to peace? Yeah. So, just a couple things, and then I'll shut up and invite you to ask whatever questions are. I did this work. I had an ecological understanding of reality until about 2000. I still did, but basically I bought into a techno-optimist view of the world. I saw technology, I basically bought into an understanding of human technology as progressive. And I became a full-blown progressive, not just in the way that we Unitarians usually use it, but really progress was my civil religion. Progress became my sort of, invisible religion. It was what I put my faith and trust in. And I thought from the caves to now to the stars. And it wasn't until, and I read several books that put me on that bandwagon, and if you heard me speak when I was here last, I think it was in 2007 or 2008, I was still very much in that place. And again, that's the 90%, or that's about the 10% of my book that I no longer agree with. The 90% that I do is all the stuff I've already been talking about. But the sense of evolutionary progression that was human-centered. So my whole understanding was that humans are the universe becoming conscious of itself. Well, that's true, but every other species does the same thing. That is, it shifted from anthropocentrism to life-centeredness or ecocentrism. And what happened was on December 12th of 2012, I watched a TED Talk by David Roberts called Climate Change is Simple. And I woke up, watched it. Connie was asleep. There was actually an article I think it was in the Huffington Post or somewhere, and it said it was in the Atlantic, I think is where it was from. And it was 5 climate charts that should have you really, really scared. This is December 3rd of 2012. I clicked on it, and there was a chart and a paragraph, a chart and a paragraph, chart and paragraph. And then at the end, there was a TED Talk, said this guy's TED Talk, David Roberts, covers almost all this stuff, and it's great. So I watched it. Connie was still asleep. I was bawling. I woke her up. I said, darling, we got to watch this video together. We both watched it. We both were in tears. I ordered 5 books that afternoon. James Hansen's Storms of My Grandchildren, Al Gore's The Earth, or The Future, Bill McKibben's Earth, and several others. Paul Gilding, The Great Disruption. And basically, I started doing what I do, which is get passionate about a topic and try to learn as much as I possibly can. I ended up spending about 12,000 hours of study, 20 to 50 hours a week for like 8 years. And I recorded over 100 articles and about 25 books, audio recorded. They're all freely available up on SoundCloud. The best of the best, what I and many others consider almost like secular scripture or climate scripture or sustainability scripture. That is the most inspiring stuff. And I lost the techno-optimism. I realized technology is one of the fundamental drivers of ecocide. Technology that benefits humans but doesn't mimic nature's technology. Chlorophyll is an amazing technology. All the components of the living world are nature's technologies. And so if we don't mimic the wisdom of that so that our technology becomes food for other creatures at its end, then what we're doing is we're doing like I characterized before. We're taking from the living world, making stuff out of it, using it, in some cases, to gain tremendous knowledge about the universe, and then it goes to the waste heap. And that process we call progress. And so I realized progress is not only not our savior, progress is the fundamental driver, one of the fundamental drivers of ecocide, as is the very notion of human-centered progress. Any progress of any so-called progress of the human at the expense of the living world is an awfully short-sighted, short-term understanding of progress. Progress has got to include life, the living world. Because if that's not progressing, we're sunk. So the last 5 years, I've been focusing on what I call post-doom, no gloom. There are, and this is really the heart of what I want to speak about and come back to in different ways over the course of this weekend. There are, I'm just going to make up a number, 10,000 uncertainties. There's 10,000 things, infinitely more than that, but there's, let's just say there's 10,000 things to be uncertain about. And if we focus on any of those uncertainties, we feel anxious, we feel angry, we feel fearful, we feel guilty, we feel judgmental, we feel depressed. And yet all of those uncertainties rest on just a few fundamental things that are basically factual. That are like laws of nature. But we don't learn these in our churches or synagogues. We don't learn these in school. Where are we going to learn these? They're precisely not taught for a variety of good reasons. And I just want to point out four things that I suggest to you completely, if we accept these four things, optimism and pessimism make no sense. Hopefulness or hopelessness make no sense. When you throw a ball into the air, you're not hopeful or hopeless. You're not optimistic or pessimistic. It's going to come down. It's a law of nature. The changing of the seasons. I mean, anything that's a natural law or a physical fact, it's goofy to talk about being hopeful or hopeless about it, or optimistic or pessimistic about it. And so I suggest that there are at least four things that we can solidly stand on that are true, whether we like it or not. Most of us won't like at least two of them, but they're true anyway. And only if we can accept them can we have deep peace in the calm in the storm, in terms of the storm of what our insane civilization is up to and our society. So the first is that most people will stay in denial. Most people will stay in denial. Most people will not accept the nature of any dimension of reality that calls into question their vision of the future is going to be rejected. If it's depressing, if they don't like it. I'll be sharing tomorrow an actual definition of denial, and it's sometimes just adaptive inattention. Sometimes it's not denial. There's lots of people that aren't in climate denial. They just don't want to think about it because they know there's nothing we're going to do that's going to make a difference at any scale that matters. So they just don't want to think about it. It's adaptive inattention. Denial gets a bad rap sometimes. But the first thing that's factually true is that we have over probably 40 examples of previous civilizations that have collapsed and empires that have collapsed over the last 5,000 years, and not once have most people got it. Most people come out of denial and try to make some major change. It just doesn't happen for very good, well-known evolutionary psychology reasons. So most people will stay in denial. Most people will not want to know. And when you combine that with the way people get information, which is through TV, newspaper, online, or whatever, and the multi-billion-dollar interests that are all about ensuring that you don't question things as they are. They've got lots of vested interest. And so any of the major media, you're not going to get the reality of our situation. So the first thing that you can be certain on is that whatever you may think, if you try to get others to believe or to accept that things are in contraction, for example, in collapse, most people aren't going to accept it. And just love them. Stop trying to convince people. Because when you really accept the other three, convincing makes no difference. So, the second thing, and I'm talking about the human developments first, is that it's not only possible, but it's contagious to live life fully and love the life you live, even in the worst of times. We have, again, many, many dozens of civilizational examples of people who are, and sometimes communities, entire communities, that were able to live with love and compassion and generosity and self-sacrifice and positivity, even knowing that the poop is hitting the oscillator. There are some core principles for how to do that individually and collectively. And that's where I think the Unitarian Universalist Association can play a role, but at least enough of us have to get through the denial of the last two things I'm going to talk about first. So, what do most people deny? Well, there's two things, and none of us are going to want to hear this. The first is that every human-centered civilization in the history of our species that wasn't wiped out by the volcano or whatever, but that wasn't wiped out from that kind of committed ecocide. That is, they used more resources and they exuded more waste than the system could bear, and they went into what's called ecological overshoot. They overshot the carrying capacity, and then the society and civilization diminished. Over and over and over again. The most important book I've ever read in my life, by far, nothing close to it, is William Catton's book, Overshoot, The Ecological Basis of Revolutionary Change. I've recorded the audio of it. It's freely available up on SoundCloud. Many people consider it the most important book of the 20th century because it's this pattern of the rise and fall, overshoot and collapse, overshoot and collapse. Because as what drives progress for at least the elites in the ruling class is taking the resources, using it, and then exuding waste, which then the systems can't bear. So every human-centered civilization we know of, no counterexamples, has committed ecocide if it wasn't destroyed by natural causes. Coming to our civilization, we're on steroids. See, I believed, for 12 years, I believed that industrial civilization was the spearhead of progress. And I suspect many of you still are in that place. Because that's the water we swam in. And so the painful fact is that industrial civilization, what William Catton calls Homo colossus. Homo colossus is where each of us in the industrial world use 20 to 50 times the resources and exude 20 to 50 times the waste of Homo sapiens. Industrial humanity is in ecological overshoot. That's a fact. That's not a belief. What that means is that Homo colossus is destined for near-term extinction. That may or may not mean the extinction of all humans. Homo sapiens, we don't know. But it certainly means a major trimming down of not just our population, but the population of most mammals. And we're talking in the next decades. We're not talking hundreds of years from now. Because what we have triggered is runaway. There are certain things about climate chaos that we are now dealing with abrupt runaway, out of our control climate mayhem. Climate mayhem, or abrupt climate mayhem, is 10,000 years of climate change in half a human lifetime. Half a human lifetime of 10,000 years of climate change. That's what we're dealing with. If every human being woke up tomorrow morning an ecological saint and committed to doing the right thing, 8 billion people had a total transformation tonight in our sleep and we woke up committed to doing the right thing and voting the right people in and everything else, there are certain things that are already so out of our control, such as the burning of the world's forests. We're in the early stages of the great conflagration, where all the world's forests, most of the world's forests, not all, but the vast majority of the world's forests, every year we'll see bigger fires, more intense fires, broader fires, and this is now unstoppable. If every human being woke up tomorrow to be eco-saint, we couldn't stop it. And if every one of us died tonight in our sleep, and human carbon emissions stopped tomorrow, carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide would continue to rise for the next 40 to 100 years, regardless of what we do or don't do. And that is repulsive. None of us can accept that easily. That's what we deny, that kind of thing. And I could go on and talk about other self-reinforcing runaway feedbacks. The coral reefs. Tell me how can anything possibly save the coral reefs? It's not going to. The acidification of the oceans, and so on and so forth. I'm not going to do a litany of the bad news tonight. My point is simply this, that of the four things, one is most people are going to, well, let me do it in this order. We're an ecological overshoot, and industrial civilization is in already decades into. It's not will we collapse? We've been collapsing. The biosphere has been collapsing for 250 years at least. The health of the biosphere. And the last 70 years, it's gone boom. It's not just in decline, it's now in precipitous free fall. Every single system that we depend upon, every one. The air, the stability of the climate, the Holocene, the jet stream, the acidification of the waters, everything that we depend upon with no exceptions is not just in decline, it's in free fall. It's called the Great Acceleration, but it's the Great Acceleration of biospheric collapse. So industrial civilization is in overshoot, and Homo colossus is destined for extinction, which may or may not mean the extinction of Homo sapiens, but it's certainly a possibility. Most people will deny that. That's number two. Number three is we're not uniquely evil. We're not uniquely stupid. We're not uniquely anything. We're doing what human-centered civilizations always do, which is commit ecocide. So we can start having compassion for ourselves and each other, not just blame capitalism or blame the fossil fuels or blame the this or the blame the that. It's time to let go of all that blame. And it's time to let go of the guilt. We can say more about that because the fundamental feelings that we feel, guilt, anger, blame, judgment, fear, depression, none of those make sense if we accept these four things. Then we start feeling gratitude. We start waking up with this being mesmerized by life and living life fully and loving the life we live, even knowing that our time is less than we thought it would. I was diagnosed with a very aggressive form of cancer. I had a tumor the size of my fist in my spleen 14 years ago. And if the chemo didn't work, I was going to die in 8 to 10 months. And I had several days of freak out. But then once I accepted it, I could die in the next 8 to 10 months. From that moment on, I had the peace that passes understanding, to use religious language. I had nothing but gratitude and trust, including trusting that I might not be around much longer. And I started living fearlessly. And every day I was like awestruck with, wow, I get to live another day. Isn't this amazing? And that's where those of us that are in this acceptance, again, it's that serenity prayer thing, but it's accepting what we can't change. We can't change the fact that most of our friends and neighbors are going to stay in denial. We can't change the fact that we are in a collapsing civilization. We can't change the fact that this is what all civilizations do. But the other thing that is the heart of what I want to speak about is how to live joyfully, gratefully. Like I sometimes call it like being mesmerized or astonished gratitude. How do we live? You know, we're all familiar with Kubler-Ross's stages of grief. You know, the first, the denial, there's no problem here. And of course, with climate, there's two different denials. There's denial on the right, which is there's no human caused climate change. It's just natural cycles. But then there's denial on the left. If we all just shifted wind turbines or solar panels or a Green New Deal or vote the right people or whatever, then we can save civilization. Both of those are denial. Both of them are wildly out of touch with reality. But that doesn't mean that the engagements, the things that we do for justice, for social justice, all the kinds of things that we Unitarians are usually on the forefront of. We can still be engaged in those as passionately as possible, but we can drop the desperation. We can drop the in order to. We're not going to change the system at a large scale, even though we'd like to. Most of us, many of us in this room have probably given our lives to that vision. That we were going to transform capitalism or transform industrial civilization, or at least transform our communities or whatever. And it can be depressing when we see that our activism makes gains, but for every gain that we make, we see to be, there's 3 or 4 things that are depressing. How do we stay inspired to what I call not activism, but love in action? What does love motivate you to be in action? Because that's really what I'm trying to do in all my programs is clarity, compassion, and courageous love in action. Clarity comes when you understand the ecological and evolutionary role of how we got here. Basically, an ecological understanding of human history and human nature. I'll do more about the human nature tomorrow. But then when we understand that, and then we have a respectful relationship to whether you call this the biosphere or the ecosphere or God or Gaia, it doesn't matter, but nurturing a more intimate relationship with life as it really is, not as we wish it was. Life as a thou, not as an it. So clarity comes when we understand that, and that's when we can move through the stages of grief, denial, then anger, right? Anger's there for most of us. It's like, no, it shouldn't be this way. Or anger at the corporations, or anger at this, or anger at that, or anger at whatever. Anger at the other political party. It's normal, it's natural, it's inevitable that we will go through that. Most of us will feel that. And sometimes we cycle back. And then there's bargaining. If we all just this, if we all just that, it's called, I call it sometimes the ecocidal delusion of the almighty we. That we can transform things. That if we just get together and do this, if we just do that, if we do this, that. I'm not saying that significant change can't happen at certain scales by a group of people leading the way. I'm not saying that at all. That can happen, it does happen. But when we then generalize that that's going to happen to these larger scale systems that have been human-centered for hundreds or thousands of years and think that we're going to collectively do that, well, we just set ourselves up for real disappointment and then true dread, true depression, true overwhelm and despair when we realize at some point, maybe in the middle of the night, that all of our efforts are not going to do what we had hoped to do. So, denial, anger, bargaining, depression. See, I'm all about post-doom, but you can't get to post-doom without going through a little bit of doom. And most of us completely avoid doom at all costs because we think it's the end point. We think we're going to stay there. We're thinking we're going to stay in despair if we allow ourselves to feel we are so. And see, that's the thing. Doom is actually the midpoint between denial and regeneration. That's, again, I'm a compost theologian. Compost, regeneration. Denial is the midpoint. But we think that denial is the end point, so we don't allow ourselves to feel it. And there's this door in the middle, and it says WASF. And we know what that means. We are so. But the paradox is, if we trust these basic things that I'm talking about, we go through the door, and there's a whole universe of possibility. Not possibility in the sense of transforming industrial civilization. That ain't going to happen. Not possibility that some evolution of consciousness is going to magically save things or some savior is going to come out of the sky. None of that stuff. But possibility in terms of how to live with joy and integrity and responsibility and love and compassion in a way that truly is why we see in previous collapsed civilizations, in the times of collapse, saints, sages, heroes and sheroes are born in these times of collapse because there are people that realize this fourth fundamental thing, which is it's possible and contagious to live life fully and love the life you live even in the worst of times. And that's what I'm hoping and praying, but that's what I'm hoping Unitarian Universalism can become, because we're not tied to some of the idolatries that have captured much of Western religion. We don't have idolatry of the otherworldly. We don't have idolatry of the written word. We don't have idolatry of beliefs. Those are three of the fundamental idolatries that many people in the Western and other religious traditions have. So we're at least free to honor the traditions, honor the various sources of our tradition, honor the principles, but ultimately live from the place of what is evidence telling us. And one of the things that evidence is telling us is collapse is unstoppable. Most people are going to deny it. We're not uniquely evil. This is what always happens. And it's so possible and contagious to live life fully and love the life we live, even in contracting, collapsing times. And the last chapter, I'll just say this and then I'll stop. Last chapter of Catton's Overshoot is all about that our best chance to not completely ruin things for millions of years, not to be geologically scale evil. Because if we continue to stay with the idea of progress or the idea that we're not in collapse, guess what we're going to not do? We're not going to attend to the things that would prevent us from being evil at a geological timescale, such as capping the nukes, getting the spent fuel rods out of the swimming pools. If we don't think that electricity shortages are going to happen because of a whole variety of reasons in the next 20 years, then we're not going to attend to that. And we're going to have multiple nuclear meltdowns. And if we have enough of them, it'll ionize the atmosphere and basically life will be set back to microbes. And life will regenerate, but it may take, 50 million years rather than 10 million years, which is what usually happens after an extinction. So let me stop, because the best way to proceed in a way that's going to be a blessing to life, or at least a contribution to life, is to accept the possibility that we could go extinct in the not too distant future, and that we're in a process of unstoppable collapse, and that our engagement, see, clarity over confusion, compassion, once you get the clarity, it's like all of a sudden you can drop the blame game. It's not about blaming everybody and anyone. Because most of us have had to pass the mirror test, meaning that we've made personal choices in our life. Some of us have stopped flying. Some of us have stopped driving. Some of us have stopped eating meat. Some of us have chosen not to have kids. Some of us have done all kinds of things related to, some of us have become, vegan. And yet it's often difficult to not judge people who don't make that choice. And yet we can let that go. Everybody's not going to become vegan. Everybody's not going to stop flying. Everybody's not going to stop driving. The truth of the matter is, with 8 billion human beings, if we all ate nothing but tofu and walked everywhere, we'd still destroy the planet. The planet's permanent carrying capacity for humans is no more than 1 billion. And we've now got 8 of us, meaning that there's going to be a die-off. So let me stop here. I've thrown way too much at you already. And just, what questions do you have that would be something that you'd love to have me address, if not tonight, tomorrow, on Sunday, because I'm going to be here for the weekend. But I'd love to respond to what you're genuinely interested in. But my heart and soul, what I'm most wanting to do is to promote what I call post-doom, no gloom, love in action. Where does love motivate you to be in action? Which is not the same thing as fearful, desperate activism. It's often doing the same things, but from a very different heart space. It's being engaged in all the social justice stuff that lights us up, but doing so from the place of that we're doing the holy thing, the right thing, the just thing. Not because it's going to transform things at this scale, even though it may make some difference. So clarity, compassion, and courageous love in action, and really grounding us in trusting what we can't change, and then finding the things where we can make a difference. Because here's the thing, Plato noted 2,500 years ago that he only knew of 3 civilizations prior to his. As civilizations contract and collapse, addictions and mental health problems of all kinds ramp up. We are in the early stages of the greatest mental health crisis in human history. And so Unitarian churches, I think, are uniquely placed and privileged to be in a place where if we do this heart work, we can be a receptive place when people are migrating, not just migrating physically, but migrating mentally and worldview-wise, and they're looking for answers that whatever their secular or their religious worldview isn't providing for them. So let me stop. I keep saying I'm going to stop, but I don't. Somebody tell me what time it is. I've totally lost track of time. 7:55. Okay. Well, in that case, no, I'm not going to talk anymore. No. In that case, let me stop here because Reverend Nathan wanted to, basically take an offering, not for me, they're already paying me, but to help reimburse the kitty. But then let's just take, our remaining time, at least a half hour, just in response, Q&A. And it doesn't have to be a question. You can tell me what you just honestly think and feel, because I'd love to hear what you what's real for you around this. Do you think I'm full of bunk? It's okay with me if you do. If you wake up tomorrow morning and think, Michael Dowd's got to be crazy, that's okay. Or are you depressed? Are you angry? Are you whatever? I'd love to hear that, as well as any questions that you might like to share. So let me actually, yeah.
So here's why we're doing an offering. This is not, especially for visitors, this is not a pay for this situation. We didn't sell tickets. We didn't, we want this to be available to anyone who would like it. And we have a speakers fund that we used a lot out of, that we've brought other speakers in and charged tickets for. So whatever you can give would be generous, gratefully received. And then really, so go ahead, ushers, if you would come forward and just, whatever you can give. If you are a visitor, please do not feel the obligation to give. Well, you can feel what you feel, I have no power. While you're doing that, some logistics about asking questions. Not everyone can hear you, even if you say that they can hear you. So we have a microphone available. And
We can carry the mic to you.
yeah, we can bring the mic to you. And online people can definitely not hear you. So the idea is, this is sort of the introduction to your work. Tomorrow is much more of a dialogue on the work, and as it relates to living in a place like Louisiana that is more traumatized than the rest of the country. We're one of the most traumatized states in the country. So this is a chance for you all to engage with him on his work. Does that make sense? Would anyone like to start with a question or a thought? Well, go ahead to the microphone.
Okay, this is just a side to Michael. Oh, never mind, you took care of it. No, you took care of it, you told me.
Oh, tied my shoe.
Yeah.
At the last minute, we went out to eat at a pizza place, and I dribbled some sauce down me. I had to, desperately quick change my shirt. So. Thank you for letting me know my shoe. Yes, question.
So what you've said so far brought
A little bit closer to the mic.
Is it on?
Is the mic on?
Test on that, Rob?
No, not yet.
No, nothing?
Nothing.
Yes? Can't hear. I know that. I'm saying test, is it on?
Wait, there.
There it is. Okay. So far, what you said kind of brought two quotes to my head. One was I think it's a Voltaire quote that Gandhi said, whatever you do will be insignificant, but you must do it.
Yeah.
But that's from the pessimistic side of the scale, because I'm a romantic pessimist. The other side of the scale is the Camus quote about the invincible summer. So just two thoughts.
Yeah, thanks.
All right. So a couple caveats to you and to the congregation, because I'm going to reveal things about myself that you probably don't think about me. And please don't let what I say be a reflection on my wife, who is the current president of the congregation. But I'm thinking.
Go ahead and hold the mic so
Okay.
that you can just use it for. Yeah.
I'm thinking like I think at work. I have to solve problems at work. I tend to be a devil's advocate, and sometimes I am an a-hole about it. okay? So here's what I heard in a nutshell from the devil's advocate a-hole side.
Okay.
Go ahead and fiddle. Rome is going to burn. Do what you can. It's not going to help. And that's what I'm hearing. Do the best to enjoy yourself. Be a vegan if you want to. It's not going to help. Get a Prius. It's not going to help. So I'm looking for something a little better than that from that skeptical view. So I apologize to all of you.
Okay, no, that's great. So yeah, thank you for that, and I can easily see how what I shared could be interpreted that way. What I'm trying to say in a nutshell is that there are many people who try to understand our situation thinking that it's a problem that can be solved. Because we are used to, in the 20th century, if we throw enough energy and human ingenuity at something, we've solved a lot of problems, or so we thought. We weren't aware of the ecological impact of much of our problem solving. And so when we step back and take a look at the big picture, we realize that we are doing the same thing that literally 80 or more previous civilizations have done, which is we've used more resources and exuded more waste, and the systems are starting to break down, and we're now decades into that process. And yes, I am saying that's utterly unstoppable. And that to the degree that we don't accept that that's unstoppable, we're going to find ourselves or our children or our grandchildren and others increasingly frustrated. Because what we hope or wish or desire, which is to be able to fix the problem, it's a predicament, it's not a problem. Predicaments have no solutions. Predicaments, we have to live with the consequences. But I'm not saying, well, yes, with regards to all the personal lifestyle choices, I'm saying eating meat or not eating meat is not going to save the world, but it may help save your soul. In other words, it's going to help you pass the mirror test, and it's going to help you feel good about yourself and living in a way that's a model for others. So I think the idea that if everybody became vegan, if everybody stopped flying, if everybody stopped driving, fill in the blank, that would somehow transform the system, that's delusional, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't do it. In fact, I would hope that most of us have personal lifestyle choices that we would continue or even ramp up. John Michael Greer, one of my favorite authors, says that we can all get used to less energy, less stuff, and less stimulation. It's LESS. We can all adapt to less energy, less stuff, and less stimulation. And I've added to LESS, we can also help reduce less suffering. So I call it less with a lisp. But less energy, less stuff, less stimulation, and being committed to less suffering. And in many cases, that includes our diet or whatever else that we choose to do. So yes, in a raw, sort of ungenerous way, what you're saying could be true of what I was saying. But what I'm trying to say is that we can have better lives individually and collectively, and actually paradoxically make often a bigger difference if we do so without this angry, judgmental thing, and when we are coming from a place of compassion. So, but thank you for the challenge. It wasn't a-hole.
Yes, I have a question. Can you give us an example or two, or maybe more, of cultures that have practiced successfully sustainability? If we have some examples, that would help us.
Yeah. Well, the Kogi Indians, it's rare that a civilization, that is a city-based civilization, they tend to become pretty anthropocentric pretty quickly. Even the Incans did, the Mayans did. And so it tends to be civilizations that are like the Kogi Indians would be one example. But most truly indigenous cultures that live in a way of what Robin Wall Kimmerer, the author of Braiding Sweetgrass, one of my favorite books, one of my favorite authors, she's a plant scientist. It was written 9 years ago, and it's still like number 9 or 10 on the New York Times bestseller list. Braiding Sweetgrass. Indigenous Wisdom, Scientific Knowledge, and the Teachings of Plants is the subtitle. And she's a plant scientist, botanist, and an indigenous elder. And she brings together and talks about a variety of cultures that have practiced that way, have lived that way, both in the past and currently. And she also draws out the principles. There are many indigenous. In fact, one of the videos that I did that I'm most proud of is called "True Sustainability: Cultivating an Indigenous Pro-Future Heart and Mind," and it's about how we colonizing white, in some cases not white, but our colonizing Westerners, how we can adopt and adapt, and not because it's going to change everything, but because it's going to basically help nourish our right relationship to reality. But Robin Wall Kimmerer's book is one, and my other longer, like 90-minute video called Sustainability 101, Indigenuity is Not Optional. And there I talk about all the best scholarship, including about 8 indigenous authors that talk about this. So I encourage that. It's Sustainability 101, Indigenuity is not optional. Indigenuity is a term by Daniel Wildcat. What he means is applying an indigenous heart and mind to today's contemporary issues.
Yes. Evolution didn't start with humans, and it won't end with humans.
Yes, exactly.
We are in the age of stars, which gave us our sun. We are in the age of humans. And when you talk about civilizations, you're talking about civilizations that have towns and armies and stuff like that are bringing us down. And the fact is that we know the end is coming, whether we do everything or not. And it sounds like what you're saying is do the best you can, help when you can, step up when opportunity presents itself, but it's not going to help. Have a good time. Whoopee, we're all going to die.
I love that colloquial, down-to-earth way of saying it. Yeah, somebody gave me a T-shirt that has a picture of the Earth from space, right? And it has Teotihuacan, the end of the world as we know it, Teotihuacan, right? And so I wear this T-shirt around Ypsilanti, Michigan, and so I've had twice somebody, has looked at it like, what's that? What? And I said, oh, Teotihuacan. It's an indigenous term. It means that things are spiraling down, probably going to get worse, but be a blessing to others, you'll be fine. Step a little closer to the mic. Yeah.
When I was preparing for your talk, I looked at a number of your videos, and you seem to be very strident on this idea of hopium. And I'm wondering, how do you know the difference that you're going through that door and you're moving into a new awareness?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks, Paul. I created 2 videos in the last year, one of them called Hopium Detox and Recovery. And I forget, the other one also has hopium in the title, and it was also a nod to Guy McPherson. What I mean by hopium is hoping in things that would require breaking the laws of physics, biology, or ecology for it to happen. It's literally impossible hopes. I'm not talking about the normal, healthy, everyday hope, except when that hope actually is guaranteed to lead us to greater suffering. Or, for example, to avoid the kinds of things that would allow us to not be evil at a geological timescale. So that's where I draw the distinction, because there's a number of quotes that I use. I've got to stop and say, for the last 4 years, I've been so using these incredibly visual presentations where each slide, I've got like 20,000 photos that my wife has taken all over North America. So every one of my slides is like drop dead gorgeous, and it's a lot of words and stuff like this, but it comes in slowly, and it's a feast to watch. But I've been used to that. So those have been like sort of my external notes. So it's been quite a few years since I've had the opportunity to just sort of like speak from my heart and respond to questions this way. And so I wish I had at hand my 3-part definition of hopium, but I don't have it memorized. But basically, yeah, what I'm meaning is that there are forms of hope that hope and fear always go together. They're like 2 sides of a coin. And there's a place of living called hope-free. It's neither hopeful or hopeless. It's hope-free. And it can be an inspiring, incredibly loving and compassionate place to live, but it's not. For example, I don't have any hope. I mean, yes, I hope that more people wake up to accepting the fundamental nature of reality so that we can do what we need to do to try to avoid as many nuclear meltdowns as possible. I hope for that, but I'm also going to do everything I can to try to see if I can make any difference in that. But I try to live my life hope-free, and I think that hope is almost always a curse. Because what we hope for or hope in is often not grounded in ecological reality, but it's more grounded in our expectations of what it's been like to live in the 20th century and what would keep our lives comfortable. Who's not going to hope for that? And yet, it's that lifestyle, that homo colossus lifestyle, that has led to this. So again, this isn't about beating ourselves. It's not about that. And the work that Meta is all about, which is basically doing whatever we can to ensure that healthy aspects of culture can pass forward. Because each one of us has gifts and skills that can be passed on to young people. I think one of the most holy things we can do is mentor a younger person. Because yes, I believe that things are in unstoppable collapse. I think that's evidentially factual. But we can't possibly know whether that's going to mean that in the next, say, 10 years, only 500,000 people die that shouldn't have, or 7 billion do. We don't know. And so how to pass on the gifts, the skills that we have, but not from a place of fear. Accepting that we're mortal. That's why I appreciated what this gentleman said here, that we're mortal, that we're going to die anyway. And so the more at peace we can be with our own mortality individually and our collective mortality, then we act and we love fiercely. We love fiercely. That's what post-doom is all about. I'll be sharing 3 definitions that I've actually created collective intelligence over close to a year on 3 definitions of doom and 3 definitions of post-doom. I don't have them on my slides, so I'll just share them tomorrow.
Just a couple of things. So I was attending a Unitarian church in Jacksonville whenever I lived there, and there was a speaker that came and said, New York was going to be underwater, and it was like 25 years, and that's already happened, and New York is not underwater. It was one of those, this is all the facts, this is going to happen, and yet it didn't happen. And the other thing is, we've only started taking oil out of the earth and natural gas a little over 100 years to do combustible engines, and we went nuts with that, and it's like, oh my goodness, look what it's done. But now we're finding all these other ways to produce energy, so I'm still going to be optimistic that this is not going to go the way you say it's going to go.
Well, you've got my bowel that's totally fine. And the thing is, one of the things I want to remind folks, because sometimes what I'm saying, and especially when I say with, like conviction, and I sound totally confident, it's like, wow, this is the way it is, and whatever. I have been catastrophically wrong in the past. I was the city of Portland, Oregon, the Y2K community organizer. The mayor of Portland asked me herself, because I was already doing community organizing work in the city of Portland. I was the head of the Portland Sustainable Lifestyle Campaign. So my job in Portland, Oregon was to help neighbors, 4 to 8 households at a time, to come together and support each other in using less water, driving less, composting, recycling, all the different aspects of living a more earth-friendly, sustainable lifestyle, and building trust and community with their neighbors. Many of these people had never even met their neighbors before. So I created 150 eco teams in Portland. So I was already doing this work. So when the whole Y2K concern, fear came about, Mayor Katz asked me to be upon the year 2000 council. So there were all these city employees, bankers, power company people, and me, this community organizer, and my job was to try to help make sure that the neighborhoods in Portland were at least prepared enough so if the power went out for a week or longer, that people didn't freak out, basically. And so back when Bill Maher was doing Politically Incorrect, his TV show, that one, he sent a TV crew to me, to my house, because I had in my basement 66 buckets of Bob's Red Mill food. I could feed my entire neighborhood for close to a month. For years, I was giving that stuff away. So don't take my doom too seriously, is what I'm trying to say. Like, yes, I think this is grounded in evidential reality. I think that we're already seeing collapse occur. But A, there are unpredictables. B, there are things that we are going to be surprised by. But one of the things that we now know for certain is that one of the main drivers of ecocide, that is where we use more resources and take more and produce more waste, is technology. So I have no faith that any technology is going to help us in the long run, even in the medium term. And human-centered progress has always, again, more than 80 examples, human-centered progress has always created collapse. So these are things that are now human, that are just part of human history. But they're not part of the human history that we learn in schools. It's an ecological interpretation of human history.
I have a couple of questions based on a couple of things I heard you say earlier. Once you came here, I think I heard you say because we are where we are in southern Louisiana. And does that have anything to do with the fact that you are here talking to us in southern Louisiana in the face of a government that wants to put a lot of protection on our coast and do many things to kind of undo some wrongs done before? And in the face of the fact that I have talked to neighbors on the coast of Louisiana who are talking about LNG plants going up next door with 27-foot walls around them, so they will probably be underwater in 25, 50 years. The second question I have is, you mentioned 2012. As I understand the Mayan calendar, they were talking at that time of the human potential becoming realized to step out of our teenage years into adulthood. We're not fully there yet. Right? But what was your reference to 2012 and the changes in that time?
Yeah, thanks for that, Jim. So December 3rd of 2012, I watched this TED Talk by David Roberts, Climate Change is Simple. And that was the shift for me out of a techno-optimist understanding of human progress and to the stars was our future. I used to be a part of what was called an evolutionary leaders group that Deepak Chopra started. And there's 90 or 100 people that are involved, authors and major speakers and stuff. And I was sort of the odd duck because I was a religious naturalist. A lot of these people were more sort of new thought or new age and sort of had more of a focus on consciousness and that sort of thing. And so many of them are very dear friends and colleagues, but I didn't ultimately fit in that group for a while. But yeah, my reference to 2012 had nothing to do with the Mayan calendar or any of that. And the reason that I'm here basically is the invitation that I got to come here was partly because this is where the impact of the wigging out of our climate is being felt most personally, intensely. And that's where especially tomorrow, I want to learn from you. Okay, how have you found, what tools have you found useful in staying calm in the storm? How do you deal with the kind of rain that you had to deal with in 2016 that wasn't even a named storm? With these hurricanes that hit with incredible ferocity and do damage. I spent much of this morning and early afternoon surveying the communities that were just absolutely devastated. And still, it shows it, and all around here. So I have not personally, my mother lost a house and almost her fiance. Her fiance's entire house didn't exist in South Florida because of Hurricane Andrew. He was in Homestead, and nothing was left but the foundation. And my mother also was traumatized by that. But I wasn't living there at the time, so I've not personally experienced drought, wildfire, where I was afraid to breathe the air and needed to find some place to move my kids. I've not experienced hurricane intensity. I've not experienced the things that many people around the world. In fact, let me just voice one spiritual practice that I have. I say spiritual, but it's going to be sort of odd because it wouldn't normally occur as spiritual. But it's something I do ritualistically Monday through Saturday. There's a website called climateandeconomy.com. Just climateandeconomy.com. And this guy, Justin Panopticon, basically puts Monday, Wednesday, Friday, climate, and Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, economy. And there's like 30 or 35 images and a short paragraph and like a headline. And it's worldwide. So I get a snapshot globally on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, climate, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, economy. All the news that matters to me, that I think is important, which isn't the human-to-human silliness. I hardly ever pay attention to most mainstream news, either on the left or the right, because I'm not interested in that propaganda. I'm not interested in the worldview that certain corporations and certain vested interests want me to argue with other and hate other people about. And so climate and economy, what I do is I read that aloud to Connie every morning. We've got our little ritual. When she wakes up, I go and I massage her feet, and then I give her some coffee, and then we come out and read climate and economy. And I read it aloud to her. And one of the things that we remind ourselves of is coming soon to a town near you. Because as we're reading stuff all over the world, climate and economy related, especially the climate stuff, some of this stuff is going to come to a town or village or city or near you in the not too distant future. And it's a way of just allowing us to have a global perspective and to be at peace with harder times are coming, and that's okay. We can still live with integrity and joy, and the two of us live in that place of what I call astonished gratitude. We pretty much live that way like 80-90% of the time. We just love our life. Now, it helps living 2 blocks from our 2.5-year-old granddaughter, I gotta say, that really helps. But there's a way to be with mortality, knowing that you're going to die, knowing that we're part of Homo Colossus, which is in a dying process, and knowing that if you want to resist that and say that's bunk, that's fine too. But nonetheless, we're going to see this decline. It's probably going to get worse. But as I said, Teotihuacan, the end of the world as we know it, doesn't necessarily mean the end of the world full stop. And we can't know what will pass on to the future. So let's do everything we can to pass on our gifts, our skills, our talent, everything that we can to younger people, and do what we can to be a welcoming presence, as Unitarians have been doing, for not just the diversity. We're pretty good at welcoming diversity, but to also welcome the people that are increasingly troubled by the world in which we find ourselves and are fearful for their kids and their grandkids.
Sorry to keep coming back here, but a good friend of ours, Michael Milkey, who was a member of this church, 20 years ago, I guess, he left. He worked with me on some things about the coast, and then he left and went out west and spent, I don't know, a decade or more just immersing himself in this. And he almost killed himself doing that, because he thought that what he had to do was mobilize the masses. And it took him a long time to understand that that was not the goal, and that it really couldn't happen that way.
Yeah, any of you that have been here for many, many years may remember Michael Milkey. He's tall, big, booming bass voice, and he's my closest male friend, actually. We've become dear friends. We've only known each other for 10 years, and he's literally my closest male friend. And I talked with him, Maida and I, on the drive up today. And he was involved in doing, with you, the two of you, what you did in terms of the national legislation for wetlands protection and stuff. It's just amazing, just absolutely amazing. So yeah, and I forgot that. Catherine Hayhoe, when people say, how do I talk to my evangelical brother or whatever, don't try. There's nothing more cute and pathetic than a Unitarian trying to talk to an evangelical in a way that's going to move the evangelical in some way. But Catherine Hayhoe is a climate scientist who's an evangelical, and her husband is a megachurch pastor. And this woman rocks speaking to evangelicals about climate. And she's got a lot of great little videos. So Michael Milkey brought me to Salt Lake City, and Catherine Hayhoe and I did a video together. That was just after I started wearing. In fact, I'll tell you the story of how this started. But we did this video, and it was all about trying to get people to mobilize, a mass mobilization to get sort of an Andrew Carnegie of climate, like to get some billionaire philanthropists to do the right thing. And so, yeah, that was one of my funnest memories, and I forgot that he was a part of that. Oh, yeah.
It seems that both the physical world and the living world live in cycles of living and dying.
Yeah.
Einstein described the physical world as E equals mc squared, and with a few fudge factors, but I think it's pretty close. And in the living world, we do the same thing. And some of the things that we forget is that, you mentioned 8.3 billion years, and I've seen that number somewhere before too. And in reality, we live about that long in this space of time. And we go through the same process that everybody else goes through. And it seems that we're living within a happening, which is
Within
about
a what?
a happening, which we find it very difficult to understand the pieces and how things are put together. The physical world seems to be a little bit easier to do for some reason, but the living world, it seems that everything in the living world wants to survive, wants to live forever. Sometimes you feel like you will, but sooner or later when you get to be my age, you realize you won't. But there are some things that affect things pretty significantly. And in the living world, it seems that the emotional is very, very strong, very prevalent, whereas in the world of knowledge and intelligence, it seems like we all start out knowing nothing. We're basically ignorant. We have to learn as time goes on. And it seems that the emotional is stronger than I guess the rate of learning, making mistakes, realizing there's a better way, to where you can put the dots together and say, well, if I did this, maybe I could have a better life. And from my perspective, it comes down to, I'm just happy and thankful that I'm here at this time. And the thing that I take the greatest pleasure in is just being thankful.
Yeah.
Just being thankful that I'm here. I've got friends. I was very lucky. Luck plays a big part in things, I think, also. But just being thankful, I guess, gives me somewhat of a peace of mind. I know I'm going to die. If there is a world after this, great. We're going to have a big party. I'm going to meet my mom and dad again, my brothers and sisters. But if not, then it doesn't matter. It's kind of like I guess Shakespeare said, full of sound and fury signify nothing. There is value. I don't think it signifies nothing. There is value, but we have to make it what it is each day, each minute, each hour, I think, like you said.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I'll actually be focusing some and having more of a conversation. Tomorrow's going to be more of a workshop. It's not going to be just me teaching. So we're going to do the chairs a little bit different, and we're going to sit, if not in circle, in two, lines. But basically, we're going to have more interaction, sometimes pairing up for exercises and that sort of thing. And really, the emotions. What are our feelings? What are our emotions? Because that's what can guide us, and that's what can also help us understand where perhaps we can actually make a bigger difference than we thought we could. Yeah.
You said something a while ago about passing our gifts to the future generations. And you left out technology. I don't know you don't like technology, but that's something I think we have to pass on.
Yeah. My response is that I honestly think that most technology that doesn't mimic nature's technology, that doesn't become food for other organisms at its end, doesn't have a future. So a lot of the things that we call high tech and are all mesmerized about now, and Elon Musk wanting us to live on Mars, I think is completely delusional. But that's just my perspective.
All right, I'm back. And this time, I'm not playing devil's advocate. I'm looking for advice, confessional kind of things. I teach at a university that's 70 miles south of here. It's halfway between here and the Gulf. And it's 20 miles from Houma, Louisiana, which was the most damaged.
I was there this morning and last night.
Okay, so you know what that looks like a year and a half out. And I was actually talking to one of my students today because I found out through some technology that he's at risk for mental health issues. How he was doing, particularly with his home, because he couch surfed for a year after Ida. Family members he didn't get along with, and now he's living next to his family home in a FEMA, he calls it a FEMA house, it's bigger than a FEMA trailer. And he said, well, it could be worse, but I'm kind of like you. I'm down there all the time. I know that it's going underwater, right? And I'd love to, be that asshole and say, look, you just got to get out of here. It's inevitable, right? Realize that you can't keep your culture here. You can take it somewhere else, but you can't keep it here because it's going away. And they're not insuring homes down there anymore. They're trying to get insurers to come in, but they don't want to insure anything south of Interstate 10. And so this is the first incident where I could see that part of that place is really dying and that the people are really moving. And I don't know how to deal with it. I feel compassion for my students. I really am compassionate sometimes. But I just don't know where to be on that. And so many of the people I work with are still, they're putting roofs on buildings on campus right now, a year and a half after the storm. So it's flummoxed me, yes, to be honest. So advice, please.
It would be arrogant of me to think that I could offer anything substantial in terms of the local issues like what you're dealing with, what you just voiced. Because every locale, every situation is going to be different. There's a theory, the most elegant theory that I've ever read about how civilization and why civilizations contract and how they collapse is by John Michael Greer. It's called catabolic collapse. That is, when a society or civilization overextends what it can afford to maintain, and then it starts to eat itself. Catabolic collapse. And his brilliant book on the topic is called The Long Descent. And it's a stair step. And there are partial recoveries. And it's a stair step. And of course, it's different in every region. So you can't generalize and say, this is the way it's going to happen, or that's the way it's going to happen, because it's going to show up very differently. Sometimes the cultural integrity of a community is what allows it to thrive, where other communities that look superficially the same suffer and collapse in a really horrific way. So how do we distinguish that? How do we deal with students and family and friends and just people we work with and are involved with professionally? especially when they've got their own life trajectory and their own expectations and their own fears and their own life situations. So I don't have any solid coaching or counsel to offer other than what you're already expressing, which is compassion, a desire to make a difference, but a desire to do so without pushing too hard, thinking that you know what's going to be best. Because it is heart-wrenching. My family lives in South Florida. Even assuming that things hold together and there still is a United States 10 years from now, which I'm not sure there will be. I think we may have 5 or 6 regional governments, but who knows? But there's going to be a mass migration of millions of people out of South Florida because they can't stop the saltwater intrusion. And I mean, we could spend all night long talking about examples in different parts of this country, different parts of this state. So I don't have a good answer to that, basically, bottom line. And then this will be the last question tonight, or well, 2 questions, and then we'll close.
So I would like to offer a request for alternative narratives than doom and gloom to help us get to the post part. I'm reminded of a beautiful program on a Canadian program hosted by David Suzuki years and years ago that I just accidentally found on TV one day about the Bishnoi in western Rajasthan. In the 17th century, a guru rose up. He noticed that the area was becoming desertified because of the destruction of the forests and taken over by farmland and so on. And he developed a series of rules, and most of the rules are ecological. They're called the Bishnoi, which means, I think it's 29 or 39 rules, it's the number, as an example of people who allow the wild animals to eat in their fields. They vigorously protect the forests. They don't burn wood. They don't cremate their dead like most Hindus because that burns wood. And they're even probably the first eco-saints or eco-martyrs were 3 women or 4 women who were protecting a tree to their own death when an army and woodcutters came to a forest to chop down the trees to make a palace, and they just would refuse to move, and they just got taken out. So, but my point is there's got to be some examples of other cultures, even if it's religiously based, where they try this alternative path of focus.
I think that's absolutely the case, and that's where we can find inspiration from previous civilizations that have gone through a collapse process. There are 3 things that every healthy society has attended to: ecological integrity, social coherence, and personal wholeness. And so good and evil aren't relative. They're not merely, context dependent. Good is what promotes ecological integrity, promotes or encourages or supports ecological integrity, social coherence, and personal wholeness. Evil is what diminishes or destroys or degrades ecological integrity, social coherence, and personal wholeness. So sometimes people get the mistaken idea that Michael Dowd's saying it's too late. Well, it's too late for some things, but it's not too late for a whole host of things that add meaning and value to a person's life, such as anything and everything you can do at any scale to promote ecological integrity, social coherence, and personal wholeness is going to be a good thing, and that's part of where social justice comes in.
Yes, being comfortable with reality. And the undisputed truth, the undisputed reality is that as far as we can see, from the universe out all the way in, as things come into being, things go out of being. And from the ant to us to galaxies, that's the truth, and that's the reality. And once we become comfortable with that, then our, 60, 70 years becomes a blessing.
Yeah. Well, I'm totally with you on that, and I think that one of the most important things we can do is recognize, my wife always focuses on this. She always reminds me to speak about identity. It's when we extend our identity beyond just our skin, that myself is larger than my skin encapsulated ego, that myself is part of this larger nesting doll that includes the entire universe. And so when Michael Dowd dies, that larger self continues, and I'm part of that process. And in fact, I was recently asked, do you believe in life after death? I said, I don't believe in life after death. I know that when I die, life continues. Of course there's life after death, But as I sometimes say humorously, if where I go to when I die, it seems to me obvious that where we go to when we die is the same place we came from before we were born. And whether that's coming from nothing and returning to nothing, or coming from God and returning to God, or coming from, the universe and returning to the universe, there's many different ways to talk about it. But if where I go to when I die isn't the same place that all other plants and animals and bacteria have gone, I'm going to be pissed. So, yeah.
So I wanted to tell you all, well,
There's one important thing I want to mention, because some of you are not going to be here tomorrow, and some of you may not be here on Sunday, but I do want to mention that all of the most important videos that I've created in the last decade exist on postdoom.com. And some of them are teaching videos. I've also had 90 post-Doom conversations with the likes of Joanna Macy and Jem Bendell and Meg Wheatley, Margaret Wheatley, and two of my closest colleagues, Jordan Perry and Karen Perry. Most people haven't heard of them, but they really focus on the actions that make sense in full acceptance. And one of my most recent post-Doom conversations is called the 15 Benefits of Post-Doom Acceptance. Because there's a difference between understanding collapse and accepting it. And there are certain benefits that are only possible when we accept that Homo colossus has a terminal condition. Those benefits, it's kind of like the benefits that only came to my life when I accepted that I could die in the next 10 months. Thankfully, it didn't happen. But there were benefits that came that couldn't have come otherwise. So I encourage you to check out some of the videos at the very top of the interviews, the conversations that I've had on the Post-Doom website.
So what I was going to say is, here is our trajectory, that there's food and reception in there for you to enjoy talking to each other. And do you want to disappear, or do you want to talk to people?
Oh, I'm happy to talk.
Okay, so he will be here to talk with. Tomorrow is intended, it is not for Unitarians specifically, but it's intended to be more workshop internal to the church. And when Maida and I invited you in, the question you were asking is exactly, I'm pointing to Ross, Online People, who talked about the college in Homa. That was the conversation we were hoping to provoke. So that is what a lot of we're hoping to talk about tomorrow. And then after it, people who are still interested, you've agreed to do 5 Zoom sessions as a discussion at the end of this. So we'll have more information on how to sign up for that tomorrow. But tonight is about appreciating you for being here, and then going, eating, and talking to people. So thank you, Mike.
Yeah, we'll do that tomorrow morning.